version. Let's go to question period. Speaking of, Ron Ambrose starting things off for the Conservatives. Let's listen in.
So, Mr. Speaker, why does the Prime Minister continue to mislead Canadians on basic facts?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government supports and applauds the Parliamentary Budget Officer for his excellent work and continue to work with him to demonstrate the level of openness and transparency that all Canadians expect from this side of the House. The fact is we made commitments to invest in Canadians, to give a larger tax-free child benefit to 9 out of 10 Canadian families, and that's exactly what we're doing with our investments today.
Here's the opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the surplus is real whether the Liberals want to admit it or not, and frankly, it shouldn't take an expert in quantum computing to recognize it. Mr. Speaker, the budget has been called the least transparent in 15 years, and their deficit and job creation numbers are way off the mark. So, Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister won't acknowledge basic facts, how can Canadians have confidence that he'll protect their jobs?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Last fall, Mr. Speaker, Canadians chose a vision that was going to invest in this country, that was going to invest in our communities, was going to create jobs and opportunities, put more money in the pockets of the middle class and those working hard to join the middle class, and create the kind of growth that for 10 years, Mr. Speaker, under the previous government, simply didn't happen for Canadians. We committed to invest in our futures, and Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what the Liberal Party is doing. Right on.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yesterday I met with mayors from British Columbia that are struggling with high unemployment in their communities. These families want to get back to work, and the BC LNG industry could create $175 billion in business investment and up to 100,000 new jobs. But these projects need to move forward, and so far from the Liberals, all we've seen is uncertainty. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister stand up and tell these families that he has their backs and he supports LNG?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for 10 years, the party opposite couldn't get things done for natural resources sector right across the country. And the reason they couldn't, the reason they still don't get it, is they think that you have to make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy. What Canadians spoke up loudly and clearly of last fall was that they need a government that does both of them together, that cares for the economy and cares for the environment at the same time. That is exactly what we are doing on this side of the House.
The member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that the former Conservative government left behind a budgetary surplus. The Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance are now the only people who refuse to acknowledge this fact, this reality. And once again, we trust the Parliamentary Budget Officer. The Prime Minister said that he does too. So why doesn't he admit that we left behind a budgetary surplus? The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we encourage the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We work hard with him to ensure a high level of transparency for Canadians, because that is what Canadians did not see during the 10 years that the Conservatives formed government. The reality is that we are investing strategically and massively in the future of Canadians to ensure that we grow the economy and put more money in the pockets of the middle class, and that we ensure a stronger future for all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, what the current Parliamentary Budget Officer says and what the former Parliamentary Budget Officer wrote is that there's a lack of transparency on the part of this government in its budget, and they had not seen such a lack of information, a lack of transparency for 15 years. So Canadians realize that they can't trust this government. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to give all the information to the Parliamentary Budget Officer and tell Canadians the truth? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, 6 months ago, the Canadians sent this government, the former government, packing, and so they are happy to see a new level of transparency and openness. They shut the door on the most secretive government in history and chose a government who is setting a new standard for rigor, transparency, responsibility, and transparency, and that's what they want as a government. The honourable member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker,
Sometimes the government treats our veterans so badly that we can't just understand it. Corporal Paul Franklin lost both legs in Afghanistan, and yet every year, like so many other veterans, he has to fill out forms to prove that his legs have not grown back. So now that this case has been exposed, can the Prime Minister tell us what he personally is doing to put an end to this ignoble situation? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign and in the years leading up to it, the Liberal Party has always stood up for and with our veterans to be there for them and to defend their interests, because we saw a previous government that not only through its political desires and also through the actions of its public service was not up to par when it came to serving our veterans. That is why we have pledged historic investments in our veterans in our last budget, and that is why we are always listening to veterans, and we have a solemn obligation to our veterans, and we are upholding it. The honourable member for Outremont.
Straight to his talking points. Why are we not surprised? Here's the question, Mr. Speaker. Master Corporal Paul Franklin lost both legs serving this country bravely in Afghanistan. Every year, like numerous other veterans, he's obliged to fill out a pile of forms to prove that he still hasn't gotten his legs back. He lost his wheelchair because he couldn't produce another doctor's note. The question to the Prime Minister was, what are his talking notes on veterans? The question to our Prime Minister was, what has he done to put an end to this intolerable situation for our veterans?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite well knows, I put forward a mandate letter for our Minister of Veterans Affairs that asked him to respect the sacred obligation we have as a country towards those who serve. We have made sure that we have reopened the 9 Veterans Affairs offices. We have increased the funding to the people who are actually helping our veterans. We are ensuring that we're cleaning up the mess left by 10 years of a government that wrapped itself in the flag every chance it got, but let our veterans down every single day.
The honourable member for Outremont.
Let's talk about messes they promised to clean up, Mr. Speaker. For more than 3 years, they promised to legalize marijuana, and yet thousands and thousands of Canadians will have criminal records for the rest of their lives because they won't even decriminalize something that could have been done overnight. So the simple question for the Prime Minister is this. His minister was in New York, of all places, instead of here today, announcing that maybe in 2017 they'll be presenting legislation to finally do something about it. In the meantime, will the Prime Minister at least promise that there will be legislation to remove the criminal record?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'm always curious to see what position the member of from Outremont will have on marijuana any given time he stands up in this House. The fact of the matter is we have been clear. We believe in legalization and regulation of marijuana because it protects our kids and keeps money out of the pockets of criminal organizations and street gangs. The fact of the matter is decriminalization, as this member proposes, actually gives a legal stream of income to criminal organizations. That's not what anyone wants in this country.
I remind the honourable member for Outremont that it is against the rule. I remind the honourable member for Outremont that we do not draw attention to the presence or absence of members in the chamber. The honourable member for Outremont.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, for 3 years they've been promising to legalize marijuana. That was a part of their election campaign. For 40 years, the NDP has held the same position, that marijuana can be decriminalized to stop sentencing people to jail terms, and we want them to remove criminal records for marijuana. Now, he said the veterans' problem was the criminals, or was the Conservatives' fault, and they are blaming us too for marijuana. And now they're depending on the Chief of Police of Toronto, the Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that decriminalization, as proposed by the member for Outremont, does nothing but give a legal stream of revenue for criminals who sell drugs. The reality is that legalizing marijuana properly, by protecting our young people, by ensuring that millions of dollars are not being funneled into criminal organizations, is the only way to protect our children and our communities, and that is what we are going to do as promised.
All right, so a busy day in question period today, starting with the Conservatives on the attack, accusing the Liberals of dragging their feet when it comes to protecting jobs in Canada's energy sector. Conservative interim leader Ron Ambrose specifically mentioning the LNG industry in British Columbia, liquid natural gas, saying more has to be done to create jobs there. The NDP starting with an attack about veterans issues, saying the Liberals are not doing enough. The Prime Minister taking that opportunity to pivot and go on the offensive against the Conservatives, saying the Harper Conservatives spent 10 years mistreating veterans. Also, there will be, of course, legalization. The NDP wondering, will there be the removal of criminal records for those who were convicted of marijuana possession? Today's a big day, with the Trudeau government announcing marijuana laws will be reformed and likely legalized in Canada within 1 year from now. We'll keep our eye on what's going on in the capital for you throughout the day.